my children, my brother's children are here. I was on the set of that movie when I was 4 years old. It was the first set I remember being exposed to with my mom, and loved the movie, loved being there, of course. But to sit next to her 60 years later and watch herself sing "Till There Was You," I mean, and to watch her other children and her grandchildren watch it, it's quite an experience. So thank you all, Turner Classic Movies and Warner Brothers and this beautiful theater, and all of you for being here on my mom's behalf. And she'll be out here in a second. I'm not
And we should tell people, for anyone who's not aware of, there's a really great story that involves your brother, Patrick, and this movie. He was kind of in the movie.
He was kind of in the movie. I was on the set, and actually I learned to ride a bicycle on the set of this movie because his older kid, Ronnie Howard, he was already riding a bike around the lot, and I saw that kid, and I said, I want to do that. And my mom got me probably a tricycle, I would imagine, at the time. And I started riding that around, chasing Ronnie. And years later, I have an office at Warner Brothers that overlooks that square where Mr. Preston sang Trouble, because that's where they shot the Gilmore Girls. And my mom came out to have lunch with me one day, and we walked around that square, and she said, "This is where I taught you to ride a bike." To Patrick, my brother Patrick, who's not here today and feels terrible about that. He runs a theater out of state, and he's in the middle of rehearsal himself, but he sends his best to all of you. And he's told this story, but I'll tell it for him very briefly. This movie is very personal for our family on a number of levels, but perhaps the greatest reason is that 4 weeks into rehearsal, my mother took the director, Morton Acosta, to lunch and said, "I have something to tell you, I'm pregnant." And she said, "I got very big with the first kid, me, so I'm worried about what's going to happen." And he said, "Don't worry, there's a lot of bustles. We can protect you in this movie." So the filming proceeds, and off it goes, and that footbridge scene was about the last scene they shot. And by then, my mother was pretty big, and they were bustling her in.
But she wasn't allowed to tell anyone, right?
She wasn't allowed to tell anyone that she was pregnant. She actually was afraid she'd be fired, because that's what they used to do in those days. Unfortunately, they also still try to ban books these days, so there's a lot of timely story points, sadly, but I regress. So Preston and my mom are on that footbridge, singing that beautiful song, "There were bells on the hill," and I never heard them ringing till there was boom. And Preston steps back and says, "What the hell was that?" And my mother looks down and realizes that was Patrick Cassidy, because he's just kicked Mr. Preston from the womb. And 30 years later, my brother Patrick has had a wonderful career on the stage in New York, and he's doing this event called Night of 100 Stars, and Robert Preston is on the bill as well, and he decides he wants to go backstage to introduce himself to Preston. So he goes back, knocks on the door, Preston opens it and says, "Mr. Preston, my name's Patrick Cassidy. I just wanted to introduce myself." And Preston takes me and says, "I believe we've already met." True story.
And just real quick, because I just think this is such a great full circle thing. Years later, Patrick would star in several versions of The Music Man with your mom as Mary.
With my mom, and she played Mrs. Peru with Patrick. So you can't get this show out of our family's blood. To that end, I've a little something I'm going to share with you right now, and she may never forgive me, but about 20 years ago, a writer friend of mine I was working with gifted me, Warner Brothers was having an auction, and he bought one of the original marching band costumes, a kid's marching band costume, and gave it to me. And today, if we can get her out here, my daughter, my mother's youngest granddaughter, Marin, is wearing it. Marin Cassidy.
How cool.
This is what therapy is for. You know, all of her other grandkids and other kids are sitting out there. Will you guys stand up somewhere?
Please do.
You're still out there? Up there. Somewhere. You're all welcome to come down here too if you like. Come down and say hey to Grandma. We're going to have her come out. You go get Grandma and ask Uncle Ryan to escort her out here. She hates me.
Now, okay, so while she's
Yes.
getting her, I'd be curious to know how many times your grandkids have seen this movie.
Never. And they've seen it a bit on television, but this again, uh-oh.
Wow, look
Here
who's
she
here.
comes.
Now,